Clara Thompson sat on the edge of her worn beige sofa, staring at the unopened eviction notice that had arrived that morning, the envelope like a guillotine over her chest. At 55, she had never imagined she would find herself here, her career of 25 years in marketing wiped out by layoffs, her savings dwindled by medical bills for a minor surgery that had spiraled into unforeseen complications, and her husband, Mark, who had once promised a lifetime of partnership, now living with someone else, leaving her not only emotionally abandoned but financially exposed. The apartment that she and Mark had worked decades to secure was now under threat, and the very floor beneath her felt unstable. Her daughter, Naomi, just 28, called weekly, her voice full of worry and hints of exhaustion, juggling her own bills and career while trying to support her mother emotionally and sometimes financially. Clara had tried everything, picking up freelance writing gigs, selling old jewelry, scouring for side work, but the scams she stumbled into online only deepened the pit she was trying to escape, leaving her $3,200 in additional debt that seemed to grow faster than she could manage. The morning started with her staring into the mirror, wondering if she had become invisible, a ghost drifting through life while everyone else moved forward without her. She remembered the times Mark had lied about business trips, the late-night texts he would hide, the sudden cold distance in his eyes, and the sickening revelation that she was no longer the center of his life. Every memory stung, amplified by the realization that she had to be her own savior now. Friends she had counted on had drifted away, busy with their own lives, leaving Clara reliant on strangers, neighbors, and occasional acts of kindness she sometimes feared she didn't deserve. She hugged the eviction notice to her chest, feeling the weight of years of financial mismanagement, betrayal, and relentless hardship press into her lungs, making it hard to breathe. Yet somewhere deep in her, buried beneath despair and fatigue, a tiny flicker of defiance stirred, telling her that survival, even if painstakingly slow, was still possible. That flicker pushed her to rise, forcing herself into the bitter cold of the early morning as she went to yet another temporary gig, her hands raw from cleaning, her back aching, yet her mind obsessively calculating how to scrape together the $4.50 needed to keep her apartment for another month, all the while forcing a smile for clients who had no idea of the storm raging behind her eyes. Each day blended into the next, a mixture of exhaustion, heartbreak, and brief moments of small victories, a neighbor giving her leftover groceries, Naomi sending a few dollars, a client paying promptly for a short article. But the debt, the betrayal, the joblessness, they were relentless, a shadow she could not shake, and Clara often wondered if she would ever see peace again, or if life was simply a cycle of fighting to stay afloat in a sea that refused to calm. By mid-afternoon, Clara's legs ached from hours of standing at the temporary catering job she had picked up through a last-minute Craigslist ad, and her stomach growled despite the hastily packed granola bar she had eaten on the bus. She thought of Naomi, who had called earlier, her voice weary but warm, offering encouragement as if her words could somehow fill the gaping hole left by her father's betrayal. "Mom," Naomi had said, "you've survived worse. You'll get through this too." Clara wanted to believe her daughter, desperately wanted to believe that a lifetime of setbacks didn't have to define her final decades. But every scam she had fallen victim to haunted her, the fake investment scheme promising double her retirement savings, the fraudulent home repair company that had taken $1,200 and never fixed the leaky roof, the predatory payday loan she had been forced to take after a string of failed freelance payments. Each one left her feeling more vulnerable, humiliated, and painfully aware of how little safety net she actually had. And yet, even in this relentless pressure, small sparks of hope appeared unexpectedly. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the hall had knocked on her door last week with a casserole she had cooked, insisting she just wanted Clara to have one night off from worry. A neighbor, a retired nurse named Edith, had offered to go with her to meet with the debt counselor, gently reminding her that she wasn't alone, and Naomi, bless her, always called, even if just to say, "I love you, Mom. Don't give up." The juxtaposition of support and betrayal, hope and despair, became Clara's strange new normal, a pendulum swinging between moments of radiant love and crushing loneliness. By the time the catering shift ended, the sun had dipped low, painting the streets of her neighborhood in muted shades of orange and gray, and Clara trudged home, counting each coin she had managed to save that day, knowing that she needed $4.50 more to cover rent by the first of the month. She opened her mailbox and found another letter, a notice from the credit card company, threatening collections and legal action if she didn't pay her remaining $300. She sank to the steps of the building, the weight of her years pressing her into the cold concrete, tears falling silently as she thought of Mark's betrayal and how easily he had walked out of their life. Clara remembered the nights he had spent in another woman's arms, the lies he had fed her, the promises he had shredded, and the bitter irony of how one person's selfishness could unravel decades of shared life. And yet, as she sat there in the twilight, a strange, defiant thought emerged: she would not let him, or the scams, the debts, or the betrayals, define her entirely. She would claw her way back, even if inch by inch, even if it meant endless exhaustion and fear. She would survive. And in that survival, she began to sense the tiniest hint of what hope might feel like, fragile and delicate, yet insistently persistent, whispering that life, though brutal, still offered the possibility of warmth, love, and dignity if one refused to surrender completely. The following week tested Clara's resolve in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Between frantic job applications, overdue bills, and sleepless nights, her body and spirit teetered on the brink of exhaustion. A scam email had arrived that morning, posing as a government relief program, offering her a grant to cover her rent, but required an upfront fee of $500, which she almost considered sending, the desperation nearly overpowering her better judgment. She sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her laptop, remembering Naomi's warning about online scams and feeling the bitter sting of self-reproach for even considering it. On top of that, her old credit card debt had ballooned to $500, and the calls from collectors were now daily, some polite, some aggressive, leaving her heart pounding with dread each time the phone rang. Clara felt the familiar ache in her chest as she remembered Mark, the man she had shared nearly 30 years with, who had abandoned her for someone younger, leaving behind not only emotional scars but a gaping financial hole that Clara was now forced to fill alone. And yet, amid the suffocating pressure, there were moments of tenderness that kept her tethered to life. Naomi showed up one evening with a bag of groceries, insisting they cook dinner together, laughing through tears as they chopped onions and stirred soup, reminding Clara of the bond that no betrayal could sever. Edith, the kind retired nurse neighbor, had sat with her during one particularly discouraging call with a debt collector, holding her hand and offering a shoulder to lean on, softly murmuring, "You're stronger than you realize, Clara." Even George, a friendly barista from the cafe she visited for warmth and cheap coffee, would offer a kind smile and sometimes a free cup when he saw the worry etched into her face. These small acts became lifelines, moments of human connection that reminded her that the world was not entirely cruel. Financially, however, the pressure was relentless. She worked 3 different temporary jobs that week, sometimes starting before sunrise and ending after midnight, her body aching, her hands calloused, her eyes burning from the strain of spreadsheets, marketing tasks, and menial labor that paid barely enough to cover necessities. One evening, after returning from a 12-hour shift, she opened her mailbox to find another threat, this one from a collection agency for a debt she didn't recognize, $1,000 allegedly owed, which she suspected was another scam. Heart sinking, Clara felt the familiar whirlpool of anxiety and shame, but she refused to give in. She contacted a non-profit legal aid service, where a patient attorney named Marvin helped her verify the debt and contest the fraudulent claim, giving her a small but crucial sense of agency. That night, as she lay on her sofa, exhausted and trembling, she allowed herself a single, fragile thought: survival was not about grandeur or comfort, but about enduring, inch by inch, moment by moment, and though she felt the weight of the world pressing down, Clara realized that even in her deepest despair, she still had the capacity to fight, to find help, and to hold on to hope, however faint, as the dark edges of the night pressed in around her. Weeks later, the weight of Clara's struggles seemed to compound with a merciless persistence. one morning, she discovered that her part-time bookkeeping gig had been abruptly terminated because the small business she worked for had gone bankrupt, leaving her without income yet again and forcing her to scrape together every last dollar just to buy groceries and cover the looming rent of $4.50. The betrayal she felt was bitter, a reminder that the world did not care for her years of experience, her resilience, or the exhaustion etched into her bones. At home, she found solace only in brief interactions. Naomi, juggling her own workload and bills, would sometimes stop by with fresh-baked bread or cups of tea, offering quiet encouragement and subtle ways of saying, "I see you, Mom, I won't let you fall." And then there was Edith, whose home had become a sanctuary, inviting Clara to share meals, lending her a sympathetic ear, and reassuring her with gentle words, "No storm lasts forever, Clara. You are not alone." Yet even these brief respites could not erase the sting of deception and loss. Clara was relentlessly reminded of Mark's absence, the man whose infidelity had shattered her trust and left a scar on her self-worth, and she struggled to reconcile the man she had loved for decades with the reality of his choices. Financial stress mounted further as scammers, like vultures, circled her vulnerabilities, including a fraudulent medical billing scheme that demanded $800 for services she had never received. Each call made her heart race, each letter caused a visceral ache in her chest, and yet Clara refused to give in to despair. With the help of Marvin, the patient attorney from the legal aid clinic, and Angela, a kind debt counselor who took time to explain payment plans and negotiate reduced interest rates, Clara slowly began untangling the web of financial traps she had fallen into. Even small victories, receiving confirmation that a fraudulent charge had been reversed, successfully arranging a manageable payment plan for another account, or finally getting a temporary freelance gig paying enough to cover rent, felt monumental. She walked home one late afternoon with her arms full of groceries, feeling the crisp autumn air against her face, and allowed herself a tiny spark of gratitude for the people who had supported her through the worst weeks of her life. That evening, she sat down to write in her journal, documenting the names of every kind person, every small success, and every moment of resilience she had experienced, as if mapping a path out of despair. Yet her heart remained tender and raw. She cried over memories of Mark's betrayal, over nights spent in empty apartments, over dreams she had once held with him that were now irrevocably shattered. And still, in the midst of grief, exhaustion, and relentless financial pressure, Clara clung to a fragile truth she had begun to accept. Her life was no longer defined by the betrayal, the scams, or the debts, but by her ability to endure, to find hope in small gestures, and to rebuild herself with courage, one painstaking step at a time. The blend of heartbreak and quiet triumph, sorrow and subtle joy, shaped her days into a tapestry of human resilience, showing Clara that even when life was unbearably heavy, it was still possible to breathe, to persist, and to hold on to the possibility of peace, however distant it seemed. As winter approached, Clara began to sense the faintest glimmers of stability in a life that had long been defined by uncertainty, betrayal, and relentless struggle, though the path forward remained painfully steep. Naomi continued to be her steadfast anchor, juggling her own young career while spending evenings helping Clara organize bills, research legitimate freelance opportunities, and even practice self-care routines like gentle stretches or short walks to combat the stress that had, for months, made Clara's chest feel permanently tight. The neighbors, too, became a surprising network of support. Mrs. Rodriguez baked bread, Edith brought herbal tea and company during long evenings, and even George, the barista, lent a listening ear and occasional encouragement, reminding Clara that human kindness could arrive in the most unexpected forms. Clara began taking cautious steps to repair her financial situation, applying for legitimate freelance writing and editing jobs, attending local community workshops about personal finance, and gradually paying down her debts, $2, 500 of accumulated credit card bills, the $800 fraudulent medical charge, and various smaller scams. Each small payment a victory and a step toward reclaiming her autonomy. Even Mark's betrayal, though still a painful wound, started to transform into a more manageable ache. Clara realized she could mourn the loss of the life she had expected without allowing it to dictate the rest of her existence. Moments of genuine joy began to creep back into her life, a brisk walk in the park with Naomi, laughter over shared memories, and even a small holiday celebration in the cramped apartment with neighbors who had become like family. One particularly cold evening, as Clara and Naomi decorated a modest tree with twinkling lights and paper ornaments, Clara felt a rare, untainted surge of hope, the kind that whispered that she could survive, even thrive, despite the scars life had left on her body, mind, and heart. Yet life remained unrelenting. A sudden plumbing disaster in her apartment, an unexpected medical expense, and a freelance client who refused to pay in full reminded her that vigilance and resilience were now a permanent requirement. But Clara, now slightly more battle-hardened and wise, faced these setbacks with a tempered courage, leaning on the network of support she had built and the newfound recognition of her own inner strength. She began to forgive herself for past mistakes, acknowledging that falling for scams, trusting the wrong people, and succumbing to moments of despair were human, and that what mattered was the courage to continue. And so, even amidst ongoing challenges, Clara felt her spirit lift. She could feel the quiet pulse of hope beneath the weight of hardship, a reminder that life, though brutally demanding and painfully unfair at times, also contained moments of beauty, connection, and triumph, even if they were subtle, fleeting, and hard-won. It was in this fragile balance between loss and renewal, despair and resilience, that Clara began to sense the possibility of peace, not perfect, not absolute, but real, and entirely her own. Spring arrived slowly, coaxing the city awake with hints of green and the soft warmth of sunlight that seemed almost symbolic of the quiet transformation in Clara's own life. She woke one morning with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years, her body still tired but her mind clearer, her heart cautiously open to the world rather than closed off by fear and betrayal. The debts that had once seemed insurmountable were now mostly under control, $2 $500 in credit cards gradually paid down, fraudulent charges reversed, and small, manageable payments arranged for lingering obligations, and Clara felt a deep, stabilizing satisfaction in each little victory, as if reclaiming her financial footing also reclaimed pieces of her dignity and autonomy. Naomi, now more confident in her own life, continued to provide loving support while respecting her mother's independence, and Clara's neighbors, Edith, Mrs. Rodriguez, and even George, remained steadfast reminders that kindness and connection could heal wounds that money and status could never touch. Clara had even cautiously begun seeing a therapist, slowly unpacking the layers of grief, betrayal, and anxiety that had built up over decades, learning that vulnerability could coexist with strength. The memory of Mark's betrayal, while still a shadow, no longer dictated her sense of self. She had confronted the pain, mourned what she had lost, and accepted that her worth was not tied to anyone else's choices. One quiet afternoon, she walked through a sun-dappled park with Naomi, observing children playing, dogs bounding after sticks, couples laughing, and felt a swell of gratitude for the ordinary moments that once seemed trivial but now carried immense weight. Clara smiled genuinely for the first time in months, the lines around her eyes softening, her chest no longer feeling like it carried the weight of the world, and she realized that she had emerged from her long, harrowing ordeal not unscathed but undeniably stronger, capable of facing uncertainty with a steadier heart. In the evenings, she returned to her small apartment, cooking simple meals, reading letters from grateful freelance clients, journaling about both setbacks and triumphs, and occasionally laughing at memories that were no longer purely painful. Life was still imperfect. She remained vigilant against scams, managed lingering debt, and navigated the challenges of aging in a world that often ignored women her age. But Clara had cultivated a resilience that allowed her to embrace hope, love, and peace in tandem with life's inevitable hardships. And so, as the city lights glimmered outside her window and Naomi sat nearby studying, Clara closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling a profound sense of closure and quiet triumph. She had endured betrayal, financial ruin, loneliness, and scams, yet she had rebuilt herself piece by piece, discovered the power of human connection, and learned that even after the deepest heartbreak, the human heart could heal, hope could persist, and peace, subtle, steadfast, and wholly earned, was finally hers. For more gripping tales like this, Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.